morning, everyone. It's a great pleasure and joy to be hosting my Swami Asha with us for the whole day. We were in South Bay yesterday, and when I first heard Swami Kriyananda speak, I heard some of his audio talks when I used to travel on the airplane, and I felt there was this deep sincerity in his voice. And Asha shares that same authenticity of speaking from her own experience, the conviction born of personal experience, and it's just a great delight and joy. So she'll be sharing with us all day. So this morning, satsang will go till around noon. We have a beautiful lunch, or more like a repast, that Love Light Michelle has prepared for us. And after that, after lunch, we actually have an afternoon satsang on Loved and Protected, which is one of Asha's books there. And also, she has a new book, which I didn't even realize until she was here, called Ask Asha, which is different questions and letters that people have written. So she'll share on those and can do a book signing and answer any questions that you have. And we also have a satsang this evening as well at 7:30 on the essence of self-realization. So this morning's the essence of self-realization, part 1. We'll see what comes of that, and part 2 this evening. But again, more than anything, we're just deeply grateful to have you here with us, Asha.
I'm also extremely pleased to be with all of you, and we have a very long and leisurely day, so we can ramble about in all directions with whatever questions and subjects you have. Our topics are so broad, we can do just about anything and still honor what we've promised today. So we're going to start with a few songs of Swami Kriyananda with our little singing group.
When the dawn breaks and then the morning sets the sun high in the sky, who would hide from heaven's glory? Who would pass the challenge by? La 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 la.
There's a morning for every nation when the sun's high in the sky. There's a time for every people to affirm their destiny. La 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 la. Even so, all of us together can create a better land. Leave the past, a new tomorrow waits for all who understand. There's a morning for every nation when the sun's high in the sky. There's a time for every people to affirm their destiny. La 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 la. Even so, all of us together can create a better land. Leave the past, a new tomorrow waits for all who understand. La 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 la. Leave the past, a new tomorrow waits for all who understand.
We'll sing this beautiful chant twice through. Swamiji put the parts to this. We'll sing it first, the choir, and then the second time, please join us.
Door of my
join us.
Door of my heart, open wide I keep for thee. Door of my heart, open wide I keep for thee. Wilt thou come, wilt thou come, just for once come to me. Wilt thou come, wilt thou come, just for once come to me. Will my days fly away without seeing thee, my Lord? Will my days fly away without seeing thee, my Lord? Night and day, night and day, I look for thee, night and day. Night and day, night and day, I look for thee, night and day. Night and day, night and day, I look for thee, night and day.
We've been brought together for reasons that we probably won't understand until the day has progressed. But the more deeply we attune ourselves, the more strongly intuition will be able to flow through all of us. So whatever it is that you were doing before you came, or need to do after you leave this place, none of it is happening right now. So exhale and relax. Inhale peace and energy. Exhale and let go. Inhale being in the present moment. Watching the breath, the one continuing reality in all of life, the very definition of life. Just settling into whatever vibration of enlightenment is ours to achieve, to receive. Whatever vibration of love is ours to receive and to give. Pray inwardly that the purpose of this time together be fulfilled in your own heart and in the hearts of all who are gathered together today. happy to see all of you. And some of you for the first time, others are old friends. It's just a real pleasure to be here. Our topic is the essence of self-realization, which basically is just about anything that we want to talk about. Before I start, if any of you have come with a particular thought in your mind that you would like me to address, does anyone have anything particular they want to hear about today?
I'm new to Untitled Center. Before I was doing purification practice, that's what I just made up. And I'm finding that the devotion practice, the singing, has really been providing a consistent heart-open space for me, and I just started coming back to like this. But I'm waking up in the middle of the night, and I've noticed that there's like a part of me that's when the stuff that hasn't been cleared sort of is there. And so I'm doing some practice with it, some being with it, and I was just wondering if there was something that would be useful to sort of meet the stuff maybe in a more loving way, or anything that might, for example.
I think I'll hold that question and come back to it.
Okay.
Because I think if I jumped right into that, there would be no background and context for it. But it's an extremely good question and actually goes right to the heart of what I was thinking of talking about. So I'll hold it right here. Yes, Michelle?
Can you talk about loyalty?
Loyalty. Okay. Did you have any particular context to that? Just in general? It's also very good. Okay. Yes.
Forgiveness.
Forgiveness. So let's just go right to the big ones. Loyalty, forgiveness. We have an hour and 45 minutes. No problem. Okay. A few of you don't know my own story, so I'm going to give you a context for what I'm going to be talking about. I think I was born looking for truth and was very frustrated to find myself in an ordinary American family who were Jewish but not practicing Jews, intellectual, which was very nice. I was very at home with that. Good family. I subsequently learned how much children suffer, and I didn't have any of that. I was very comfortable and well taken care of. One of my very earliest memories, really I must have been 2, was being scolded by my mother for some probably justifiable naughtiness. We were in the car, and I'm sure my older brother was the instigator, but I'm sure that I jumped right in as soon as he instigated. And from the front seat, I mean, all children have that experience where a mother turns around from the front seat and don't make me come back there. And I got my feelings hurt. And I have never been a person who likes to be unhappy. It's just, it's a bother to me to be unhappy. I prefer to be cheerful and feel good. And to extricate myself from sad moods has always been a very high priority. And I was about 2, small enough to curl up on half of the floor of the back seat. This was before child seats. You could just romp around all the time in the back seat. Curling up on the floor of the back seat, and in my 2-year-old mind, I was aware of the fact that even though I was suffering on the surface, there was some other part of me that was not touched by anything that happened outside of me. And in order to solve what I was experiencing, which is that my mother hurt my feelings, I knew that if I just went deeper and deeper inside, I would come to the place where it wouldn't exist anymore. And that wasn't what they call dissociation or anything like that. It was quite much more conscious and sophisticated than that, which was that there was and is an enduring level of happiness, that anything else that happens is just on the surface, and when we're disturbed on the surface, we can go down into that core, and as long as we stay connected there, nothing can harm us or touch us. Just the fleeting memories of childhood. Another memory of my childhood, very close to the same time, was very similar. I had a big shelf of toys. In my mind, it was as big as the wall of this room, but I suspect it was just a little bookcase, because my parents would not have loaded me up with that many toys. But I conceived of, this is also characteristic of my personality, a lot of enthusiasm at the beginning, but not as much follow through as I should have. I've worked on it, and I'm better. So I conceived of the idea that I was going to clean up my toy shelf. And the way I decided to do that was to dump everything onto the floor. Just pull everything out and dump it on the floor. As soon as I did that, the whole job became far less interesting to me. And so there I was, having made a huge mess of my room, and I went cheerfully off to play until my mother saw what I'd done, and she dragged me back and said, "Put all this stuff away." And in that moment, this tremendous sense of the great tragedy and oppressive nature of life struck me. That I would have to now put all these toys back just seemed overwhelming to me. But my mother was solid. She was unrelenting. "You made this mess, honey, you clean it up." So I'm sitting there, and I remember doing that thing that children do, just trying really hard to cry, and not quite being able to make a real tragedy of it. But then just picking up each toy, as if it weighed a ton, and just lifting it up with this attitude and this little bit of a tear, and then desperately dropping it on the shelf like this. And even in the midst of this 2-year-old or 3-year-old melodrama, a part of me said, "Oh, honey, just put the damn toys away." Just like, why are you doing all this? Why are you making out of life such a difficult situation when in fact you just move through it? Things happen, just move through it. What is all the drama about? But of course, one touches these things and then moves away from them. I believe in reincarnation, and this is not the beginning of the story, and we arrive here with whatever we completed from before. We just have to run it through these little bodies. Bodies that start small, so we have all these confusing elements of not knowing how to find our mouth with a spoon and things like that, how to walk, how to move. But the full intelligence and actually the full state of awareness of consciousness is exactly the same from babyhood. We can tell. One of my friends, her whole family of people became involved in Ananda. I met them. She was shopping in a store where I was shopping, and her 6-month-old baby was on the floor on the little rug she put down. And I went down on the floor and I looked into those eyes, and the full person is now 27 years old and recently won the gold medal in snowboarding in the Paralympics in Sochi, Russia. 6 months old, he was looking right out at the same eyes. If somebody had told me what that baby was going to do, lose his leg, overcome it, become a great athlete, I would have said, "You got it. It's right there. It's in you. Just be like that. Who are you? Where did you come from?" Now, eventually, skipping lots of time, when I was 22, I met Swami Kriyananda. He was 44 at the time. He was at Stanford University. I was already engaged in a very serious search for truth, and I had already crossed over to the eastern side of things, from the west to the east, and I was very steeped in that, but it was all in my head. It was just all these fabulous ideas. I loved them. I knew that they were what I was looking for, but I couldn't make my life different. It was just the same life. I would get up in the morning, I would go to work, I had my friends, I would come home, I would spend time with my friends, I would go to bed, I would get up, I would go to work. I couldn't change it. And when I saw Swami Kriyananda, literally, he emanated what I wanted to be. And it's the truth of these great souls. The story of the life of Buddha is told is that after he sat under the Bodhi tree and refused to get up until enlightenment came, and he was enlightened, they describe his first sermon was preached without words. He was just walking down the street, and some other ascetics who actually had a low opinion of him saw him and just saw him walking and felt that here was someone who was carrying the full vibration of spirit, and they were drawn to him before he spoke. Because all the time, our thoughts and attitudes and vibrations are telling people and talking to people. I've had the unfortunate experience of being engaged in litigation on more than one occasion, and had to have what's called my deposition taken, where the lawyers question you and they write everything down. And I'm a really good communicator. So my lawyers had to really tell me that the point of having your deposition taken is to be a really bad communicator without actually being dishonest. So they had to teach me to listen entirely and only to what I was being asked and to answer entirely and only what I was being asked, which was extremely interesting for me because I realized that about 10% of verbal communication is verbal. And all the rest of it is an exchange of energy and an exchange of thought. And we do that all the time without even knowing it. We don't realize what we're responding to, but we're always responding to the blending of vibrations. You know, nowadays, I think it's Dr. Lipton, if I have the name correct, who's taken all these fabulous pictures of people's auras, and he just shows how, when people are together in a room like we are, that even though we can touch these physical boundaries, in fact, the blending of our energy is enormous. So even in an antagonistic situation like a lawyer's conflict, still, you know, just to hear what they ask and then to answer just what they ask just takes us and reduces us down to almost nothing. And then you say it, and they say it, and you say it, and they say it. And I was a great witness for our side, a terrible witness for their side. Just telling them nothing, even though I knew just what they wanted to know. But why help them in these circumstances? But there are all these realities, which is what I'm saying here, that are both within us and around us, that we are living all the time. But in our Western society, until recently, and recently is the last few decades, nobody ever talked to us about these things. Nowadays, the world is much more expansive, and Los Angeles has been a hub of this kind of expansive energy for a really long time, not the least of which is Yogananda himself deciding that this was the place to plant himself and to be. So there is an enlightening wave that's really begun to go out from many parts, including directly from here, that is making it much easier for all of us to find our way on a pathway that isn't just assigned to us from an external reality. This is a great relief. This makes it so much easier. Children bring to the second and third generation of people just growing up with these expanded ideas. It's not at all unusual to have been raised now with a wholly different point of view. When I was, a number of years ago, when I was in Seattle for a period of time, two of my friends were Episcopal priests, lovely men, very dedicated to their path, and they ended up becoming disciples of this path as well, in addition to running their Episcopal churches. And they invited me to be part of a weekend retreat that the Episcopal priests were having. That was just before being a priest and a clergy person became a female profession. Nowadays, at least half, if not more, of clergy people in the world are women. But then there was only one woman priest among the group, about 30 men and me. And I was there to teach them about meditation and various other things that my friends thought would be helpful. So our retreat was on a Monday, and if you're a conventional church person, Monday's your day off, because Sunday's your main work day. So Monday was our day off, and so we're leaving for this retreat, and everybody's really jovial and jocular, and we're making lots of jokes, and we're just getting ready to have lunch, and it's necessary to say grace, because we're all clergy people, so we're going to say grace, and because everybody is a minister of some church and used to leading it, there's a lot of joking back and forth about who gets to say the grace. And all of a sudden it's decided, I believe his name was Wally. Wally decides he's going to say grace. And we're just being folks like us. All of a sudden Wally says, "Beloved Lord." Like that. I thought we were still joking. I thought we were still just having fun. So I laughed out loud. And we were in fact in the middle of the prayer. Because before we had been talking to each other, and now we were talking to God. We have to talk to boys. Then we just talk to each other. So I'm, mortified. Here I'm supposed to be leading this retreat, laughing in the middle of the prayer, pretending like I got a gnat in my throat or something. I had to cough. It was a bad beginning, and the beginning got worse. It was just worse. I held it together. But I had to really think about it a long time later, and later I was talking to my priest friends about this, like, what was going on? And one friend said to me, he said, the whole weekend it looked like, and he put it perfectly, you were constantly translating from your own language into the language that these people spoke. I said, yeah, that's exactly right. Every idea I had to put into, well, I don't know whether Episcopalianese was the right word, but this is how I began to think about it. For me, spirituality had always been, and continues to this day, is simply, I'm trying to live in such a way that my life is fulfilling, that I can avoid suffering, that I can experience joy, and that I can be useful to the world around me. These are the things that I have always wanted. I've wanted to do something that mattered, and I wanted to be happy doing it. Later on, and I'll talk about how Master talked about it. Master reduced the whole spiritual path to two very important principles. All that anybody wants is to experience bliss. We can call it happiness or even pleasure, but it's all an octave, a diminishing octave of pure bliss. And we want to avoid suffering. And absolutely every decision you make, if you look at it carefully, is motivated by one or the other of those ideas, which of course are closely interrelated. But sometimes we think of it as, this is going to cause me suffering, I need to avoid it. This is going to make me happy, I need to rush after it. And the entire spiritual path is completely that, because the nature of divine consciousness is pure bliss, and in a matter of degrees, as we move closer to that, we have less of suffering and more of that bliss. And as we move away from it and live our lives in contradiction to the way we are made, this is not God punishing us, it's just the way we are made. If we contradict the way we are made, we create suffering for ourselves. And as long as we keep contradicting the way we are made, we suffer. And we can be furious at God, we can be mad at everyone around us, we can blame fate, we can blame other people, we can blame our DNA. But whatever it is, as long as we contradict our true nature, we suffer. And when we start living in harmony with it, we begin to find ourselves freer and freer and having more and more of what we want. And I didn't come first to God or to religion, just from my own experience. Being the kind of Jew that I was raised, I would call it spiritually neutral. I was not prejudiced against Christianity, and I wasn't particularly prejudiced in favor of being Jewish, except that it's a cultural, ethnic identity that even to this day I still feel like I care. But it really had very little to do with God in my own life. So when I found first spiritual ideas presented to me first by Vivekananda in a book, he's a disciple of Sri Ramakrishna, he's one of the great spiritual teachers of these times. It was the ideas themselves and the sheer experiential logic of what he told me. And he told me three things that mattered. What you experience today is the result of what you did yesterday. And what you will experience tomorrow is the result of what you're doing today. And it was the first time anybody had ever given me a clue. Oh, isn't that an obvious clue? But no one had ever said that to me. No history teacher, no college professor, nobody. But wow, there is a cause and effect relationship to my own life experience. I can now spin that out for you in great subtlety as the law of karma, but it came to me just as simple as that. I can influence my own destiny by my own actions. I mean, hallelujah. I've been waiting, I was only 18, but I've been waiting a really long time for somebody to tell me what the heck was going on and what to do about it. Vivekananda told me, don't think about yourself and you'll be happy. As a teenager, I had thought about nothing but myself. And I found that to be an absolutely fascinating but utterly bewildering idea. Well, what else do you think about? And I don't mean in a selfish way, because by nature, my joy came from enthusiasm and from sharing and generosity. I was born with that kind of an attitude. But nonetheless, I was always, the way I put it, I was always calculating my own position in things. And in my case, I was a pleasure seeker. And so I was always looking to see what was going to be the most fun for me. Not at the expense of others, but if I promised you that I would join you for this, and then somebody gave me a better offer, I'd just go off with the better offer. I would always think about how I could maximize my own experience. And it was just to stop calculating my position. It was just, I didn't even know what to do about that. I didn't know where to put it. I literally started trying to think about the world that I saw around me. I started counting telephone poles. Just to be doing something other than just thinking about myself. I didn't know about japa and prayer and chanting and affirmations, all the more sophisticated ways you can break a self-centered habit, so I just did what I could. And then discovered an extremely peculiar and interesting thing, which is, if I didn't stop and ask myself, how are you doing, dear, how do you feel, I felt fine. It was only when I turned the spotlight on me and began to worry about my own position and calculated that it became so important to me. Now, there's a lot of nuances to that, so I don't want to be too simplistic. But nonetheless, a great deal of suffering is just, as I learned, as Master said it much more refined later, is just an obsessive concern about one's own position and an unawareness of how interrelated we are in the world around us. Just as I was speaking here, we could see an aura picture of all of us. We would realize how blended our energies are, and how to a very large extent, even just looking at it with measurable instruments, that our consciousness is very much entwined with everyone else's consciousness. Where do we draw the circle that this is just me? And that was the idea that the tighter you draw that circle around just me, instead of making yourself better and stronger, you actually become more and more constricted, more and more cut off from the source of your energy. You have fewer and fewer options in terms of how you define your own happiness. So he said, Vivekananda, don't think about yourself and you'll be happy. What a novel idea. And then the last thing he said that I remembered was, and this is from the Bible actually, although I didn't know it, from the New Testament, true love casts out all fear. And if there was one operative reality in my life, it was simply the words fear. I mean, just fear. Fear of lots and lots of things. That's why I was always calculating my own advantage, because I was always afraid that I would miss out somehow. But fear of so many different realities, then to posit love and fear as opposites was just a fascinating concept to me. Well then, what do you love? You love your husband, your own children, your parents. What do you love? What can you love enough that it will vanish from your life? You're starting at the age of 18. Those three principles really just launched me into what has turned out to be this, which is a whole life that has been dedicated to the spiritual path. Now going back to my Episcopalian friends up in Washington, D.C., it turned out that what I was doing was spiritual. It turned out that what I was doing was related to God as I began to understand what God meant. It turned out that I was a devotee, that I was a disciple, that had all of these characteristics. And now I've become part of Ananda, and now I travel around and I represent Ananda, and I wear blue clothes, and I'm a Naya Swami, and all these different things. But none of it has anything to do with anything. I'm the same 2-year-old child I was lying on the floor of the car, realizing that when your consciousness is disturbed by any conditions that seem to come outside of yourself, you can always go within and find that place where your consciousness is always bliss. And everything else is just about the search for bliss and the need to avoid suffering. And it can get very seemingly complicated, but it always comes down to that very simple truth. When I was with the Episcopal priests, the confusion of language that I was finding was that, I'm going to go a step in between this. When my husband David and I live in the Palo Alto area, and we have been doing what Dharma Devi and Narayan and Ramani and Rose are all doing in this area, but we've been doing it longer, 25, 27 years now. And we built up a community and a temple and lots of other things there. And when we were first getting ready to start our community, which is we have leased an apartment complex, and about 70 of us live together in that apartment complex. And we had a friend he was a unity minister as it happened, and he was a local man at that time. He's gone on to another state by now. We were having lunch, we were talking about the fact that we were going to have a community. And the people who came to our church and to our temple, we were going to all live together. We were so excited, we were telling him all about it. And he listened politely, and then after a few minutes he said, "Why would you want to live with them?" He said, "Isn't seeing them on Sunday enough?" And we sort of, we were so sincere on his part, we just had to stop and think. But no, because this is not for us church or religion. This for us is breath, literally. This is life. This is the need to avoid suffering, the desire to experience bliss. If we can help each other do that, why wouldn't we want to do that all the time? And his whole point of view, and he was not an Episcopalian, but this is what I found when I was there with the priest, it was something that we do somewhat outside ourselves. It makes our lives better. It makes our lives better to go to church, to be a member of this, to support this, to have friends, to have like-minded souls. And the Episcopalians, because they're a bit intellectual and they have Doctor of Divinity degrees from Ivy League universities and things like that, it's very much, we've studied this. And, we're biblical scholars, and they're fascinating and good men. I don't mean in any way to denigrate a very valid path. It was just so different than mine. I didn't even know how to relate to it. This isn't about these ideas and this historical that, and this is what the scriptures say, and then whereas this other interpretation says that, and when we're here and when we talk to God, we talk in this tone of voice. Because this is how we talk to God, as opposed to talking to you. It was just alien. I was like from another planet. I landed somewhere completely other. And I had to try to help these people understand that this is not something you put on. This isn't your vestment. This is who you are, just growing from the inside out. And this is motivated by this uncontrollable urge, and it really becomes like that. It's not something that you calmly sign up for. It's something that you can't help yourself. And people are driven with different degrees of desperation. Some of us were exceedingly desperate. I remember before I met Swami Kriyananda, and I was awake enough to understand that there was an alternative way of life, but not graced enough yet to understand what that was going to be. And I was fully grown up, which is to say I couldn't just keep postponing it and thinking that pretty soon I'd get grown up and I would find something. I was a grown up, and it wasn't happening. And I was standing in the window of this apartment that I was living in, and I was looking out the window, and I was contemplating my options. And my options were things like drug addiction, because of the unbearable, meaningless reality of the life that I was looking at. And that seemed like a really solid option. I just needed to just block my consciousness out, just get rid of it, because I didn't see how I could live. I could kill myself, which also seemed like a really valid response. I mean, on a certain level, it wasn't like I was actually drawn to it, but I just stood there contemplating. If life is as empty of meaning as it appears to be, And if all anybody expects me to do is just spend the next 50 years just doing this and this, and this here was my great fear. Forgive me if I'm touching anybody's direct life, because this is just Asha fantasy. My fear was that I would marry a dentist, that I would have 3 children, that I would have a station wagon, those station wagons that had the wood on the side, ready old enough to have more of those, and the dog in the back. There would be a dog in the back, there would be 3 kids in the middle, there would be me here, and my husband would be a dentist, and I would be driving that station wagon around. And to me, that was like the epitome of my nightmare. And it wasn't because I didn't want to get married and have children. I never had children, but I am married. It was just to me that would epitomize to me that I had never found any other meaning, and I just walked down the track that everybody expected me to walk down. And that was why I was contemplating just throwing myself off the Golden Gate Bridge, or going down to Haight Street and seeing what I could find in the way of substances that would just obliterate my consciousness. Or I considered having a nervous breakdown. I mean, I really did. I just stood there and I thought, I just have a nervous breakdown, because this is what people do. And many people who do have psychotic breaks with reality have them because of exactly the pressure I was feeling, which is there's got to be more meaning to life than this, but nobody seems to be able to tell me about it. So I thought, I think I'll have a nervous breakdown. And I think I have had a lot of nervous breakdowns in previous incarnations. I don't think I've been a drug addict or a suicide for a long time. But I think I have had psychotic breaks with reality quite a lot. Mental aberration. It seems real familiar to me. It's kind of like turf that I know. I just kind of know what happens when I have had a number of friends who go there, and I just start like, I know where you are, but you're going to have to come back. Standing in my window thinking about having a nervous breakdown, I had this picture. I had this picture of the chaos it would create, and everybody would get worried, and eventually there'd be an intervention. Then they would take me to the hospital, then I'd be in the hospital for a while, and I'd go through all that whole cycle. And the whole thing would end with me standing at the window looking out the window. Except I would be really tired and probably in death at that point. And so I thought, what to do? When we are desperate enough, an answer always comes. And that's divine law. Swami Kriyananda talks about his own finding of the autobiography of a yogi. He was prepared to leave everything behind and go live in the South American jungle, just in the hope that some deeper reality would come to him from that experience. And when he was that determined, and he was no longer just looking for a pleasant life and I'll just throw in a little spirituality on top of it. He was realizing that this is a matter of life or death. It's either bliss or it's suffering, and I really need to find my way through it. Then autobiography of yoga came into his hand. Swami Kriyananda walked into my life. And I learned that the whole story that I had been going for since the age of 2, which is the earliest I can remember, was self-realization. And self-realization meaning this, which is, who am I? What is the reality around me? And how do I live in such a way that I feel that I'm standing in what is really meaningful? And self-realization is the phrase that Master used as the clearest and the most dynamic statement, because it starts with where we all start, which is every one of us lives trapped inside of this consciousness. And I have mentioned to you that I have a certain familiarity with mental imbalance. Not that I actually have been unbalanced in my life, but my mind goes in directions like that. And I often think about the fact, which I'm sure all of you have thought about, which is how utterly inescapable our own consciousness is. And if I let myself go there, I can freak myself out now. I just try not to do it. We're just always going to be inside our own heads, aren't we? And this is why people become drug addicts or drink. I have a great sympathy for why people do that, because it's hard day after day, just being inside your own head and having to live with who you are, who I am. I won't put it on you. Just living with the reality of who we are. And all of this is what you were bringing up, all of the things that we've done in the past that are now defining our present reality, all of the longings and fears we have for the future, we just stand right in the middle of these realities. And sooner or later, Swami Kriyananda said once, because a friend of mine had a break with reality, and I said, Swamiji, I don't feel like all breaks with reality are metaphysical, but I really felt like in the case of this friend, that was exactly what it was. The person got right up to the edge and saw what was going to be required in order really to make peace with their own consciousness. And they just decided, I don't think I'll do it. I don't really want that kind of responsibility. I think I'll just wander over here to a dream world for a while. Because self-realization is not a path that is done for you. It's putting the responsibility for your own life and your own happiness in the only place it can possibly be put, which is in your own hands. When Yogananda came to America, when he came specifically to Los Angeles, he taught from the Bible, he taught from the Bhagavad Gita, but what he really taught everyone was the age of priests, and the age of dogmas, and the age of rituals, and the age of divine intercession, and the age of somebody else doing it for you, and you get to pay them. One of my friends in India was talking to us about some of the elaborate rituals that he had to do. He bought an apartment, and at that time, I don't know if it's changed in India now, but they didn't have the system of mortgages. You had to pay off your entire place before you could move into it. So he worked very hard, and he paid off his entire flat. But before he could move into it, he had to go to the astrologer and find out the auspicious day for him to be able to move in, which was 5 months later. And then once he had the auspicious day, he had to hire all the priests and pujaris to come in. And they lit a fire, they had a oven inside his apartment, and they broke coconuts against the wall. So after all that was done, he had to have all the walls repainted and all the lights repaired. I said, he was a very westernized Indian. This was 30 years ago. I said, you're just like, what? And he said, it's absolutely unthinkable. There was just no way I could have moved into that apartment without this whole cycle. And then he remarked, he said, Hinduism is the only religion you have to pay somebody else to practice for you. You have to hire the pujari. It's a profession to do all these rituals. Everybody requires that they be done. You can't do them yourself. You have to buy it from someone else. And you really think about that. You're paying somebody else money, and it's his profession to be the intermediary between you and the spirit. There's money that's needed. Which is why when Master came to America, he did not bring Hinduism. He brought self-realization. He brought almost nothing of the accoutrements of his culture. He could have brought it all. It's very important to realize he brought almost none of it. He occasionally lit a fire and said a mantra. But that was all. And he was perfectly versed in everything. Because self-realization, which is to say, spiritual responsibility is in the hands of every individual, which is the only place they can ever actually be. When people would ask him about, he was in the 1920s and 30s when churches and temples were just much more a part of American life than they are now. Denominations, and I am a Methodist, I am a Lutheran, was a really big reality, and people would ask him about things like the Catholic practice of confession, for example. And his answer was, he said, if the priest can actually forgive your sins, he said, go and overeat and ask if he can cure your tummy ache. It was just a very simple question, but what you are today is the result of what you did yesterday, and what you are tomorrow is what you're doing today. And you can pay anybody as much as you want to pay them. But it's true that people do have the power to change your karma. But it's not an institutionally based power. It's a God-given power, and it either exists or it doesn't. Yes?
The challenge seems to me, personally, to be to remain attached to those things that you were saying, even when we know them to be true, keeping our head in the right place.
Well, I was about to go there, and this is also what this lady was asking, so let me go there for a minute. One of the principles of self-realization is very simple. which is that there are three levels of consciousness. And there are certain principles of self-realization that are really good to hold in your mind. There are three levels of consciousness. We use the word subconscious, but we don't use it the way Jung uses it. It's not, it's an English word, and I'll define it. It's related to the general idea of subconscious, but slightly different. Subconscious, conscious, superconscious. Okay? Subconscious is the collective of everything that you've ever experienced and you've ever done. In this incarnation, from the beginning of it, and in all your previous incarnations. It's exactly like the memory in your computer. Just program it in a certain way. It's passive in the sense that it can't create a new understanding or a new reality. It just collects all the data because everything in there is already over. Sometimes it reorganizes it and gives it to you in a different form, but it can't really bring you something that you aren't already. And we are very much the product of everything that we've done before. I mean, you can think of it very simply, whether or not you had breakfast this morning, what you had for breakfast, whether you had an argument with the people at home before you came today, whether you woke up on the wrong side of the bed or had a bad dream or a good dream, or if you've been fighting with someone, or if you're deeply disappointed about something that you really want. All of these, every thought, every feeling, every action, this is the system of the chakras. This is the power of karma, cause and effect in life. So we have this huge subconscious reality that we're carrying around all the time. And that's who we are. Everything up until this minute. And it is a vibration of energy. It's an aura of light. It's literally the sound of Om, if we could hear it, our own particular unique song. And it's the pattern of energy in the chakras. It's our horoscope. It's all those pieces. Now, the opposite side of that is super consciousness. And if we think of ourselves as a pyramid inverted in this direction, with our little ego self as a small point, and then our consciousness opens out, and it literally opens out to infinity. And that is also us. And that is the spark of divinity that is actually the soul, as we call it, the life force that makes us who we are. If you've ever seen a physical body after someone has died, it's so startling how absolutely not that person the body is. Even though we're all looking at each other, we all recognize each other by these faces and these features, but when you see someone's body with the same face and features, but with the life force pulled out of it, it just has nothing to do with them anymore. It's literally just like a chair or a piece of clothing. It's just sitting there. And whoever that person is somewhere else, but it's definitely not there. And that superconscious part of us is the part that connects to the masters, it connects to greater reality, that connects to intuition, that connects to infinity, to immortality, perfect health, perfect love, all of that. But we're only aware of a very tiny bit of it. Now, at all times in our life, we are subject to the influence of both of these fields. And we're being pulled like a river is pulled to the ocean. We're being pulled toward a greater awareness. And we're being pushed toward a greater awareness. If we think about everything in our life, from infancy onward, it's all about increasing our awareness, isn't it? I remember a little experience I had with a little child. He was about 2 years old, Daniel Rinsler, because some of you know him. He's a grown man now, but he was a little 2-year-old child. When I came to visit his house once, he was so excited. He grabbed me by the hand, dragged me up to his room upstairs. He had a big bureau like this, and he pulled open the bottom drawer of the bureau, and it was filled with his little clothes, including all his socks. And he pulls out the drawer, and he looks at me, and at the top of his voice, he says, "Socks!" I said, "Yeah, Daniel, wow, socks!" And then he just gets this look on his face, like, "You are not going to believe this." He pushes the bureau, the door shut, and of course there's just a bureau again. And he reaches out and pulls it open again, and once again, socks! Because he had figured out every time he opened that drawer, there were socks in it. This is like, we take that for granted, but how did he know? You know, the first time was an accident, the second time was still lucky, but now it's a pattern. It's a pattern. There were always socks. And that's the beginning, isn't it? He didn't know there were socks, now he knows there's socks. So now when he wants socks, he doesn't have to wait for his mother anymore. He just goes to the socks. And everything step by step. Think about it. You know, we learn to walk, we learn to talk, we learn to make our own food, we learn to find our own friends. Everything that we learn, it's an ever-expanding level of awareness. We make miserable decisions. We suffer terribly. And it occurs to us that every time I open that drawer, there's misery in it. What a surprise. So I'm going to stop opening that drawer. And this drawer has something else in it. We increase our awareness. And if you think about anything you've ever learned and progressed in your life, any difficult experience you've ever been through that has turned out to be a blessing for you or positive in any way, it's because you increased your awareness. You increased your sense of who you are, of what you're capable of where your happiness comes from, of how you can survive, however you define it, your awareness has increased. That's superconscious pulling us. Why don't you expand your self-definition? Why don't you become more than you have been? Why don't you become all that you could be? And on the other side, the subconscious says, we're fine just as we are. You know, we're comfortable here. We like living this way. We like being in this house. We like having this job. We like being married to these people. We like having our children stay small. You know, we like all these things that we like. This is the subconscious telling us that the familiar is where your happiness lies. Don't go there into the expansive new territory. Just stick with what you know, kiddo. And isn't that what we see in ourselves? Some new opportunity or terrible challenge comes to us, and our first response is no. I want to just stay exactly as I am. But the superconscious is saying, it's going to be great. There's so much more that's good if you'll just go this way. And the conscious level doesn't really exist as a separate reality. It's the battleground. That's just what it is. It's just the battleground. Jennifer's question. If that's what self-realization, that's what the path is. And we can add in the gurus and kriya and affirmations and prayers and a whole bunch of other things. But all of those things are designed for one purpose, which is to give us the tools to constantly choose the superconscious side instead of just sinking back into the familiar. Drug addiction, madness, even suicide. It's just shrinking back into a smaller way of being because the challenge frightens me. I don't want to step into the unknown. And the essence of self-realization is every day, every minute, what am I choosing? Am I willingly and dynamically choosing greater awareness, greater possibilities, greater self-definition? Or am I just allowing myself to just stay in my own routine, just do what I'm doing, plan my little vacations, take care of my grandchildren? Or am I really, even in the midst of all of that, asking, how can I serve? How can I expand? Who can I become? Why was I born? Where does happiness come from? Who am I in reality? Now, is that easy? No. That's why self-realization is a really, really, really small movement. And may remain so forever, who knows? But only a few people really want it. In our temple, which is a nice temple, we have a nice energy. Someone came in once and said, a lot of people talk about overcoming the ego, but you people really need it. And we never saw him again. It was sort of like that other minister saying, why would you want to live with those people? You've seen them on Sunday enough. You people really mean it. This isn't just a plaything for you. This is real. Any questions? Jennifer?
I guess I'm trying to be more specific in the sense that we find tools when we reach that place where we're frustrated. And I recognize that I'm in a bunker doing this because it's difficult how to just acknowledging the difference between the polar opposites doesn't necessarily resolve the complexity.
No, he doesn't, does he? And this is what this woman here was asking. You know, I think the first step is to realize you're no different than anyone else. That's Lucy's great advice to Charlie Brown. You may remember when he pours her heart out in the psychiatric booth, and that's Charlie Brown's so popular. You know, the psychiatrist is in, Charlie Brown goes and tells her all his problems, and Lucy says, "You're no different than anyone else," and she charges him 5 cents. But that's not a small comfort. Because when I was very first starting on the spiritual path, and I lived in Ananda village, which was rural and extremely primitive, simple, I'll call it, very, very simple living, primitive living at that time. And none of what Ananda became, it was all in Swamiji's vision, but it was not in our vision. We didn't know what we were doing. We were just having a great time out in the woods. And I had a false understanding of how progress is made in any field. I had what I read in a psychology magazine, which was called A Perfectionist Script for Self-Defeat. That was an article in Psychology Today about 40 years ago. I may still have it in my file. And basically it says a perfectionist sets an impossible standard and then gets to fail every time. Because we start by setting an impossible standard, so we always get to be inadequate. And it worked for me really well, because I always got to be inadequate, and so I always got to be in a state of angst about my inadequacy. I had an argument with a friend recently. Well, actually, she was more like a transition for her. She had that in spades. She's an immensely talented, beautiful woman, brilliant, capable, accomplished in every way. Her one and enormous fault was that she was convinced no matter what she did, it wasn't good enough. Finally, I was so frustrated with her. I said, "Your husband thinks you're wonderful. I think you're wonderful." And then I named about 30 other people who are all great souls who all think you're wonderful. Swami Kriyananda thinks you're wonderful. And against all those points of view, you insist that you're the only one who knows. I said, "What egotism." And she sort of startled for a moment. And then she began to laugh. Because that's what you do. I mean, I'm never adequate is really just the reverse of I'm graves in the will. Because you get to be constantly self-involved all the time. You need to always be thinking about how you're not doing well, which serves very nicely if one wants to be constantly self-involved. And I played that game for a very, very, very long time. It was always a subtext.
See, even the awareness, what is the true end behavior?
First of all, you have to realize this is not working for me. And you have to ask yourself, what is the tool? Kriya Yoga, affirmations, prayer, japa, discipleship, service. I mean, it's the entire spiritual path. There's no shortcut. But you're really asking me, whether you realize it or not, isn't there an easier way? Isn't there just some way I can cut this off at the root? No. This is the spiritual path. And so you have to ask yourself, am I going to get on the spiritual path? Am I going to accept that I have put in a lot of causes that cause me to be uncomfortable? And the energy that I put into all of those causes that make me uncomfortable, I'm going to have to put in commensurate energy to redirect myself. I'm not just going to be able to say, I think I just won't be like that anymore. And this is when we get into the esoteric way that the chakras work and the law of karma and so on. But the first thing, and this is what I was starting to say, I finally had to realize as a young devotee that I was very sincere in the spiritual path. And the only thing I could honestly claim is that I really wanted to be on the spiritual path. And that is the first step. You have to really ask yourself, how important is this to me? Do I really want this? At one point, I tricked Swamiji to giving me a compliment. He was complimenting a lot of other people. He wasn't complimenting me. So I kind of went like that. So he had to say something. "Oh, Asha," he said, "you're very sincere." So I went home and got real depressed. Because I wanted to be a lot more than just sincere. A few days later, Swami Kriyananda noticed that I was moping. He said, "Why are you, what's wrong with you?" "Oh," I said, "You're just being told other people that they were wise or wonderful or whatever, and he just told me that I was sincere. I felt like I'd really gotten the movie prize. But he said to me extremely seriously, he said, Asha, sincerity is everything. And I really had to think about that, because he was right. You know, however inept and impossible, and how many times I would slip back, and how many times I couldn't keep it in my mind, I really want to learn. And once you really want to learn, you will learn. If you just want to contemplate how much nicer it would be if you could learn, that's very different than actually really wanting to learn. So I decided that as incompetent as I was very sincere. So I decided, well, this must be what happens to sincere truth seekers. And no matter how goofy or impossibly non-linear my progress appeared to me, I would just say as a little mantra, I am a sincere devotee. This is what's happening to me. This must be what happens to sincere devotees. And what that took out of it was all the angst of failure. And if you can take the angst of failure out of your inner world, then you have so much more energy to just try again, and try again, and try again. So there is no shortcut to it. You will fail exactly one less time than you will succeed. and there's no way around that. What you're asking about techniques for dealing with what you deal with, this is where I think faith in God, devotion to God, and an extremely active inner relationship with higher beings, whether those beings are these masters or your guardian angel or however you think about it, because you can't win the battle by yourself. That's one of the things that happens when you open to superconsciousness. One of the things that subconsciousness tells you, you're fine just by yourself, you don't need anybody else. We've done all right until now, but then you ask yourself, is this all right? Is this really the freedom where I want to be? You have to bring fresh energy into it. Subconscious can't bring you fresh energy, superconscious can. And the most powerful way to bring that is the power that's on the wall here of love. Love casts out all fear. Love casts out all anxiety. Love casts out all time and space. Everything. Did you have a thought?
No, I think I'm in the process of just learning how, because part of it was like, I don't want myself to get caught up in, oh, okay, love is really wonderful, but I'm not really dealing with what needs to be let go and what's to be. And so I think what I'm transitioning into learning is how I can hold both, and let this thing just unfold and process and move, and not have to be caught in it, and learn how to love in that space.
Yes, exactly. There's several thoughts, and I don't want to be contradicting other things that are being taught to you, so I'm not trying to in that sense. But just a moment, I lost track. Keeps slipping in and out. We were driving on the freeway trying to get here today, and we just made one small mistake. We missed the 405 exit, and so we're all in the car. It's all right, we fixed it really fast. We're all in the car. We all know perfectly well that we are now not heading in the direction we want to go. We're going approximately 70 miles an hour in the direction we don't want to go, moving farther and farther away from our divine objective. The mere knowledge, and this is partly answering Jennifer, the mere knowledge that we are heading 75 miles an hour in the wrong direction does not in itself cause us to go in the right direction, because we have a lot of energy going in the wrong direction. We started out and we just went cheerfully forward because we were 4 women in a car, and guess what we were doing? And so we just weren't paying attention. But we have all this momentum now going in the wrong direction. And so in order to get back, we had to have a discussion, we had to look at the signs, we had to compare notes, we had to evaluate what the possibilities were, we had to get off the freeway, we had to turn around, we had to go to the, as it happened to somebody at a GPS, we had to go into the gas station, we had to ask them, we had to go back, we had to get back on it, we had to go this way, we had to do that. In other words, the momentum in one direction, an equal amount of energy had to be applied before it could be turned. And all of that energy had to be applied after we understood where we wanted to go. And I think it's very important when we're dealing with our own confusions and delusions that you have to have a lot of respect for the amount of energy it's taking you to become as confused as you are. It's like, I'm a very bright woman with a lot of energy. And I have applied myself as assiduously to wrong ideas as I am now applying myself to right ideas. I mean, I've never done anything halfway, and when I did it wrong, I did it wrong. Full commitment, because it seemed like a good idea at the time. What can I say? It seemed like a good idea. I'm talking about previous incarnations. I think one of the reasons I have to talk so much about self-realization now is that I think I talked a lot about a lot of things that were not so good. I think a psychic told me, and I quote, that I helped start the French Revolution. It's apocryphal, it's not necessarily true. I think I committed myself, and my enthusiasm dragged a lot of people with me in a lot of directions that did not turn out to be such a good idea in the end. And probably I got my head cut off at the end of that one. So now I'm trying to correct all of that, and speaking a lot of energy to correct all of that. But I'm sure I put a lot of energy into making it wrong. Every internal attitude that we have, every misunderstanding, every confused idea, and I love this one, it seemed like a good idea at the time. I mean, think about it. You look back and your friends, all your friends told you not to marry that guy because he was really a loser, but you knew better. And then after it's all done, and the disaster has run itself out, or you married the gal and whatever it was, you say, well, it seemed like a good idea at the time. What can I say? But all that committed energy, you have to have a lot of respect for that. You were sincere. You were doing the best you could do. You were not stupid. It doesn't serve us to call our own limitations and our own failures stupid. They're not stupid. They're the product of the same intelligence that is now trying to live somewhere else. And they're very strong, and if you call them stupid, you don't honor them sufficiently to really be able to put out the energy to change the momentum. And if it's a strongly held idea, you're going to have to just patiently accept the fact that I'm going to have to put out as much energy in the new direction as I have already put out in the wrong direction. And it's going to take a little bit of time. And that's just the way it works. And even though Jennifer seems reluctant to accept what I'm saying is the actual answer, it is the answer. Once you realize that this is the process. The process is I get a glimpse, I lose it. I make a step, I lose it. I get a glimmer of understanding, I lose it. But I just succeed one more time and I'm back. And as long as you just persevere, eventually the momentum is changed. And with each, when you start talking about the chakras, with each positive action, you begin to shift the magnetism. So it's not an all or nothing. It's every little bit of energy in the right direction. You know, once we knew we were on the wrong path, once we got off the freeway, once we turned, we were now in the trajectory that was going to take us where we wanted to go, but we still had to finish the loop that our mistake had created.
It's great what she brought up, because the first thing is loyalty and forgiveness. Because the loyalty that you have, the commitment to yourself, is what your foundation is to be able to finish what you started, in the sense of your spiritual path, staying on target. But she brought up letting go, and in my experience, the very first thing to do is forgive yourself. But what I find is you have to forgive yourself every day. Even when you finish with one situation, every day a new situation shows up, and the next thing you want to forgive yourself for that. Right now, for me, what I struggle with is fear, and every day now I have to forgive myself for the fear here, even though I know God's got my back, even though I know I have full faith and trust in Him, even though I know He's the answer. My ego is so strong that it just says, fear is going to be with you every day also. So, you have to forgive yourself and say, God, I forgive myself for having these fears. I know I can trust you. I know I'm faithful for you, and I know you have my back, but yet I'm still scared. So,
I think I'd like to take a short break. People have to be their parking meters, everybody needs a little air, and then we'll come back and go back.
okay.
This is the principle of breaks. Refresh yourselves. Put money in your meter if you need to, but don't start a whole new story anywhere. And start an intense personal conversation with the whole. Okay, let's move in. So I see the air conditioner's right under the microphones. We'll only go about another half an hour, so just hang on. I've been asked about forgiveness, and Michelle asked about loyalty, and I was just really wanting to take a moment and try to think about both of those points, because they are really key issues. Master said that loyalty is the first law of God, and loyalty is the characteristic of the earth chakra, the first chakra. Not that we necessarily develop chakras number 1, number 2. It's not like you build them like that. You have to build them simultaneously. But nonetheless, the earth chakra, the characteristic of loyalty, is that it's the grounding reality. So we need to think about this. The negative side of loyalty is to be too rigid because of devotion to principles that are not flexible or expansive enough for you to really live a life on them. People can be very loyal, but they might be just loyal to very narrow ideas. And so even though the loyalty in and of itself is a laudable characteristic, it also depends on what we give our loyalty to. So as we grow spiritually, we tend to understand what we should be devoted to in a more and more expansive way. I mean, sometimes people go through more than one spiritual self-definition in the course of a lifetime. You could have been devoted to being a Catholic or a priest or a nun or any number of different ways of growing up spiritually. But then your awareness increases and you suddenly become loyal to a different form. So what we have to, first of all, is we have to give our loyalty to the right principle. And what we need to give our loyalty to is not the form of things, but the principle it represents. The principle of loyalty should be to self-realization, which is to say to an ever-expanding awareness, so to a greater capacity to experience happiness and to escape suffering. That should be what we are loyal to. And it should be that over the course of a lifetime, we get a more and more subtle and sophisticated and expansive understanding of how to avoid suffering and how to find happiness. So whereas our loyalty may appear to shift over the course of a lifetime, in fact, we want to, as much as possible, be always adhering to the right principle. So you understand, this is what happens to spiritual organizations. They start out being based on principles. And then over time, loyalty becomes defined as being to be loyal to the form that asserts that it stands for those principles. And then they often gradually totally forget the principles at all, and you're just supposed to be loyal to the form. So above all, we have to understand that loyalty in the right form is loyal to a principle, and that principle is expanding self-awareness, greater compassion of the heart, and the words that Swami uses, well, Master defines ego as the infinite self identified with a limited reality. And so it's a very useful definition of ego, because ego is not really an enemy. It's just a fact, which is that I am the infinite spirit. I am immortal. Death is an illusion. I have all the powers of self-realization that I will ever have. I just don't know it. Because I have taken that infinite potential And I have identified myself so deeply, starting with the body that I'm in. And, because I'm a woman, I'm not a man. Because I'm an American, I'm not an Indian. Because I learned to speak English, I didn't learn to speak French. Because I'm of a certain age, I'm no longer a child. Because I'm a disciple of Paramahansa Yogananda, I'm not a disciple of someone else. And I identify with all these realities. But in a state of final realization, even when death comes and this body falls away, I'm going to discover that I'm still there. Swamiji said to me once, he said, nothing happens when you die. Nothing. He said, nothing happens. You just are exactly who you've always been. You're just not wearing your body anymore. And people who deeply identify with their physical bodies become very fearful when that physical body begins to die. People who have meditated and have learned to define themselves as a greater reality than just this body, they experience some natural anxiety, but mostly it's just, big changes coming. I had a dream once where I was having my head chopped off. It's a very friendly dream. A friend of mine was rather a big man. He was in charge of chopping my head off. And he had one of those medieval battle axes, with a big curved thing. We were just meeting together on this big empty room, and it was friendly between us. He was going to chop my head off, and it was time for my head to be chopped off. And we thought, we might as well, get on with it. So I put my head down on the chopping block, just laid it down like this, and in the dream, he picks up his big axe like that, and just when he raises the axe in the dream, it crosses my mind that this could hurt. I hadn't thought about that until then. And then I remembered that Master said, if the soul sees that the body is about to get smashed up, it pulls away before that moment of impact. How many times have you heard people say when they were having an automobile crash or something, suddenly they're not in their bodies anymore? That's because the soul is not stupid. I just don't really need to hang out. I think I'll just be somewhere else and let the body get smashed up, and then we'll decide whether we're going to go back into it or not. And so just at the moment when he's got his arms raised and he's about to come down, I remembered that I didn't have to be there. I didn't have to experience it. So I pulled out of my body in the dream. And I started going up like this. And I'm looking down at the scene, and it's sort of like this big empty stage. And my friend has now brought the axe down, and I didn't see my dead body very clearly. But I looked at it, and I say sometimes, I'm very proud of this. My response was, I just said, bye-bye, Asha. And I was very happy. Being Asha had been tons of fun. And now it was over. Bye-bye. And then I woke up, and I thought, good. But that really is what we're working with. Now, our body is a final identification. We identify as a wife. We identify as a beautiful young woman or a handsome man. You see sometimes people who are past their prime still trying to flirt and pick up people who are quite age inappropriate for them because they don't notice that they are not. I was amused. This woman, actress, she had been a very famous bohemian and had many lovers and that kind of life. She's an artist, beautiful woman. She was 100 years old. And she said, she was honest enough to say, when a handsome young man comes into the room, my response to him is exactly the same as it always has been. His response, of course, is different. Because despite the fact that her body is aged, she's still deeply identified with that sensual, sexy woman, who she'd always been. And so what happens to us as we increase in awareness is that certain identifications are taken away from us. Your beloved husband suddenly gets another lover and you're gone. Your fabulous business crashes and you have to give up your fancy home, and now you're working in a department store. In our area, there's a lot of people who came out of Iran when the Shah fell. And this woman's waiting on me in some fabric store. And this woman, you could just tell. I meet a lot of Persians. They always call themselves Persians. The ones who came out before the Shah went down, they always call themselves Persians. They never call themselves Iranians. Anyway, she's Persian. And she's just talking to me. She's telling me, not only did she never work in her life, she never washed a dish, she never,
she never ran the washing machine, and she grew so wealthy and taken care of, and then all of a sudden she's a clerk in the store. You could see she had not made the transition at all. Her identification was entirely with what had been, and she was stuck there. And the whole process of spiritual growth is to identify with a greater and greater reality. Now, and our loyalty needs to be with that expanding awareness, so that each time we actually begin to identify with a greater reality, we don't have any trouble shifting our loyalty, because our loyalty is to ever expanding awareness. And I look at my own life, and of course now most of it has been at Ananda, but even when I look all the way back, even though I didn't know about God or disciples or anything, discipleship or Kriya, but I was always loyal to the same principle. And that principle was self-transformation for the purpose of happiness. And as it formed itself in an ever more useful way, I didn't have any problem. I could just move with it. I was raised Jewish and a heckler once when I was in Texas. Well, how dare you abandon your heritage? Who's abandoned any heritage? I have the same heritage I've always had. I just put a bigger and bigger identity around it. It's your point of view that if I'm this, I can't be that. Of course I can be. I just become bigger and bigger. The same way that I've been Asha, but at some point I won't be anymore. I'll be a bigger reality. And if I keep my loyalty, if we keep our loyalty where it belongs, we can effortlessly move. This is what, when I met Swami Vivekananda, found this particular path of self-realization. Finally, I found the unifying thread. And the Master himself describes self-realization. He calls it the unifying thread behind all true religious and spiritual teachings. He did not mean, I, Paramahansa Yogananda, this line of teaching, the self-realization fellowship, Ananda, is the unifying reality. No. The principle of self-realization, which is that spiritual life is in your own hands, and it's a question of what you do. That is the unifying reality behind all teachings. And they're all the same. They're just different ways of getting there. And you must be, above all, absolutely loyal to expanding consciousness. Because if you're not, you jump ship every time. Every time you get stuck. Just as Jennifer was asking, no, this is too hard, I'm not going to do it. And you just put your energy and your loyalty back to something else. You have to hold on. Even if you're lousy, even if you're really, really terrible. Sometimes I say to Master, I don't really care if I'm the last on your list. I am on the list. I can be the very, very bottom. Somebody has to be at the bottom, and if I'm at the bottom, no problem, but I am on the list, and I am not letting go. And that's the kind of loyalty we have. We can fail for thousands of years as long as we don't change our understanding and don't get on. Now, how this relates to forgiveness. Forgiveness is not, for me, it's never been a concept I've lived with as much, but I really appreciate how, as a way of articulating, it's really helpful to people. So now I'm going to do a little translating. Forgiveness implies, I'll tell you the story of my friend, Seva, who in her early years had an inclination to be moody, and she was very close to Swamiji and very conscientious about helping him. This is, I'm talking in the 1970s. And something happened and she was not as sensitive as she should have been. She let some other consideration get in the way, and the details escape me, but we were in some public venue and she caused a certain amount of inconvenience and embarrassment for him. It was not small. Something really happened. And, we all weathered it. It wasn't catastrophic. It was just inconvenient and embarrassing, and we got through it. Like 4 or 5 days later, she's moping around. Mom says, what are you so upset about? She said, well, last week when we were there, and then I did that. And he said his response to that was, what egotism? And she was, a little offended. Egotism? I'm beating myself up every single day. How can that be egotistical? And he says, because of this. You were so shocked that you made a mistake that all these days later you keep obsessing about it. And you see, you thought you had such an image of yourself that I'm so perfect, I do it right every time. that when I did something wrong, it was just so devastating to me that I just can't recover from that. He said, of course you made a mistake. Everybody makes mistakes. Life is just full of really bad mistakes. And so forgiveness is required if we're shocked by the fact that we're not perfect. But really, whatever made us think we were perfect? Like, you're not perfect till you're an avatar, and if you are, you're not in the middle of this discussion. Like, we're here because we have vast numbers of unlearned lessons. That's no cause for shock or embarrassment. That's like the condition. Welcome to the crowd, friends. You know, at least we're here, like at least we have a clue, at least we have the idea that maybe we can get out of this. But the necessity for forgiveness starts from some kind of polarization, which is that I should be different than I am. I proved to be exactly what I am, and now I have to start all over accepting that. Let's try to cut this off at the root. Of course I am who I am. Who else did I think I would be? Of course I have incarnated with the exact karmic condition that I have built for myself up to this point. And as it reveals itself, rather than being shocked and having to go through a whole cycle of getting over it, we should just be interested. I had this very difficult relationship with this woman at Ananda, which by the grace of God we finally resolved. And I was in an interim period where we had to be together a great deal, and it was always abrasive. And then life separated us in time and space. And from a distance, the deep love that was really there, just began to flower. And so as long as I didn't see her, I began to love her more and more. Circumstances conspired to bring us together, and I was so confident of my affection for her that I actually arranged for us to share a living space. About one day into that experience, the entire frustration and antagonism was full-blown again. I happened to be in a car with Swami Kriyananda, and I'm just weeping. I was just devastated. Oh, I so thought I was over this, and here I am. I'm just having to deal with it all over. Well, I never learned. I'm sure you can all say it like this. And Swami said, just very casually, he said, you thought you were over it, so you weren't putting any energy into changing yourself. He said, now you know, that's the good news. Just like flipped it completely. It's like this sudden weakness was revealed, and instead of making it a big crisis, it was like, okay, so you have more work to do. Like, why should I be shocked? You think how much energy we used, and bad enough that you got the problem. Let's not make a huge complex about it, which is that it becomes this huge self-concern about not being perfect. And the other thing that you might suspect is that you're not fooling anybody, everybody knows. I remember when I first came to Ananda, I remember exactly where I was standing. I was looking at this bulletin board. And I'm a very intuitive person, and I'm very conscious of what other people are thinking and feeling, and I'm also very observant. I think as much as anything, my mind goes fast. Some of it's intuition, some I just notice. I just notice what people are doing. So I'm standing there, conscious of the fact that I know a lot of private business of a lot of people in the community, not because they've told me, but just because I can see it. And then all of a sudden, the eye of mortar turns on me, and I realize, whoa! All these people in this community know my private business too. It's just like, this is the sudden moment of enormous exposure. And I'm standing there. This is summer of 71. And I think, honey, get over it like that. Like either you just surrender to the fact that you are what you are, and why would you think that you could hide? And just live it. Or you're going to leave. You're going to have to just go and isolate yourself somewhere. And it took an act of will. And it's not so easy. But see, just part of that, of course, I make mistakes. And then the question of forgiveness doesn't enter any mistake. It's just a natural flow. One man who's a very, very advanced soul, a beautiful man, had some rocky years, and he did some really outstandingly daffy things, like way out there, even in the history of Ananda, way out there. And he and I were not particularly personal friends, but we were companions on the path. And when one of these really daffy things just became public news, He walked right up to me. He just walked right up to me like this. And he said, of course you know, what do you think? And it was just a pure act of, now, when we talk forgiveness, that was real forgiveness. It's like, I just am who I am. Whoops. And of course you know it. And I'm inviting your input. That's way beyond just sitting in your own room trying to make yourself feel okay. That's just, I am what I am before my conscience and God, and why should I pretend otherwise? And I knew he didn't really care what I thought. He was doing that because I need to identify with the greater reality and just let go. If I'm just going to nurture all these tiny little feelings, how's that working for you? What do you have at the end of that? And of course he just walked right through. Of course I was absolutely charmed. I thought what he had done was as daffy as the duck. It was completely nutty. I don't know what he was thinking, but he was so beautifully free. And then all that was wrong is that he done something that seemed like a good idea at the time and really wasn't. But there was nothing wrong with him. You see the difference? Merely because we do daffy things doesn't mean there's anything wrong with us. We just identify with where we're going. And when these things come up, it's not always easy. It takes a real effort of will. You have to just practice. But the more you practice, the easier it gets. Fair enough. All right. We're close to the end, but is there a question or a comment? What was the question you asked? I think Martin had asked me about how to work out our karma faster. But I think that's too big a question for 5 minutes before the end of the hour. But we have another session this afternoon and tonight.
Can you talk a little bit about follow through and how to better cultivate that?
You're really talking about willpower. Master says to develop willpower, the most important thing for developing willpower is to set yourself achievable tasks. We tend to like the grand gesture that is impossible to fulfill because we're really bored with the little gesture. I got up this morning in the apartment I'm staying, and I was going to leave the room with the bed unmade because after all, I'm the only one. And it's just like, why am I leaving the bed unmade? It looks much prettier if I make it. So I just stopped and I made it. And I had the satisfaction of having made the bed. Completely trivial. But every time in our life we have a choice between putting out more energy or less energy. You always, if you just get in the habit of always just putting out a little more energy, you'll be amazed that if you just, and it doesn't have to be the biggest possible gesture, it's just a little more than your worst. That's what I suggest. Here's the worst that you could do, here's the best that you can imagine. You probably can't do the best that you can imagine, just don't do as bad as you might. I talk about this sometimes if you're addicted to chocolate or you have difficulty eating too much ice cream. I've literally done this. So somebody, because I like sweets and cookies, but it's not good for me to eat lots of them, especially the particular age that I am. Those days are over, and I can just have as much as I wanted. So somebody brings in something, and I fear that I'm going to eat it all. I will quickly put most of it down the garbage disposal, but not all of it. As my compromise position. I'm not going to put it all down the garbage disposal, but I'm not going to keep it in the house either. I'm not going to do the best I can imagine, but I'm not going to do the worst that I can see. And if you just make that, your spiritual path is made moment by moment. And if you just get in the habit, and there's another phrase that I learned. When we moved into a different place in our community, we had all these windows, and I went to the store and I discovered how much curtains cost in America. So I took all the dimensions to India and had all these curtains made over there for a fraction of the cost, and I came back and then they needed to be hung. And for some bizarre reason, I decided I would put up all the curtain rods myself. I'm so not a tool person, really terrible. But I put all the curtain rods up myself. If you come to our house, you'll see that a lot of the curtain rods are like this is not the wall, not the wall. My husband kept saying to me, there was a man named Matthew, call Matthew. Nope, I'm going to put these up myself. And I made tons of mistakes, and I had to learn how to spackle and all that stuff, and then repaint. But I learned something extremely important, and I knew I was doing it on purpose. the patient application of willpower accomplishes anything. And ever since I put those curtain rods up badly, whenever I'm confronted with something I don't feel like doing, I say to myself, the patient application of willpower. And so instead of thinking of the whole task, which of course for me it always is overwhelming, but you just apply a little bit of willpower very patiently to what's right in front of you. And I learned it from the curtain rods because it meant nothing to me from the curtain rods. I don't like the need to be a woman who knows how to use tools. When I sat to write a book, man, I was scared to death. I didn't have any idea how to do it, and I remembered patient application. And so I found that, small things, big things, it's all exactly the same. And the impatience is what causes us not to do it. It's the patient. And, is this so terrible? No. Is this so terrible? No. Is this so terrible? No, I can do this. I can sit here for 5 more minutes. Well, great souls, I like to honor time. And now is the time. We are having lunch. We are having a couple more sessions today for those of you who are interested. And it's been a great pleasure to spend with you.
Thank you.
I'm happy to take your personal questions and talk with you. Here I am. I'm away from home. I have nothing else to do.
So we'll bless the food in a moment. Just to remind you, we have all of Asha's books here, Loved and Protected, which she'll talk about this afternoon, 2 o'clock. And her new book, Ask Asha, and also Swami Kriyananda as we've known him. So you can get those cash or credit card, just see Dharma Devi or myself. And tonight is at 7:30. So everyone's welcome to that. And 2 o'clock and 7:30. And tomorrow, of course, is the service at 11. And you can come early if you want for the meditation and purification at 10.
What's that 7:30?
7:30 is another satsang with Asha, Essence of Self-Realization. It'll
Part
be
3?
part
Who
infinity.
knows? Part 2. We never know till we're here.
So what's 2 o'clock?
2 o'clock is,
Loved and protected.
Okay.
We've just put names on things.
yeah.
That's a little
But it's
arbitrary.
specifically about her book, and it's a time when if people want to get her books and have her sign the books, and
Yeah.
If you're asked questions, we can do just a question and answer session.
Yeah.
Who's ever here, whatever.
And we do appreciate any donations. Your generosity helps us share the light and love of self-realization, so it's greatly appreciated. That's
Where's the
due
donation
to
basket?
right here by the door.
Okay.
Yeah. Tuesday, you help us sing the song?
Please stand.
Sure.